I was sitting at the head table of my son Marcus's wedding when my 7-year-old granddaughter Sophia gently tugged on my navy silk sleeve and whispered words that made my blood turn to ice water. "Grandma, don't look yet, but there's something under the table that you need to see. Something with your name on it." If you're listening to this story, please subscribe and stay with me until the end. What I discovered that day changed everything. Drop a comment and let me know where you're hearing this from. I want to know how far the truth has traveled. Sophia held my hand with her little fingers, small but firm. Her brown eyes, usually bright and full of mischief, were too serious for a child her age. "Promise me you'll listen to everything I have to say first, Grandma, before you look." My heart started racing. In my 73 years on this earth, I've learned to trust my instincts, and every single one of them was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The reception was in full swing around us. Crystal glasses clinking, laughter echoing off the chandelier-lit ceiling, my new daughter-in-law Vanessa glowing in her pristine white gown as she danced with Marcus. But all I could focus on was the fear in my granddaughter's eyes. "What is it, baby girl?" I whispered back, adjusting my pearl necklace nervously. I was dressed impeccably as always, my midnight blue cocktail dress perfectly tailored, matching pumps, and the diamond earrings my late husband James had given me for our 40th anniversary. Even at family celebrations, I believe in presenting yourself with dignity and class. "There's an envelope down there, Grandma, taped to the bottom of your chair. I saw someone put it there during the ceremony." Sophia's voice trembled slightly. "It has your name written on it in big letters, but the handwriting looks scary." My mouth dried. During the ceremony? That meant someone had deliberately placed whatever this was while we were all focused on the vows, while the photographer was capturing every precious moment, while I was dabbing at my eyes with my lace handkerchief, watching my youngest son promise to love and cherish the woman I'd grown to adore over the past 2 years. But before I tell you what was under that table, what I discovered that would shatter the illusion of this perfect day and expose a betrayal so deep it nearly destroyed our family, let me take you back 3 months earlier. Because what happened at that reception hall didn't start that day. It started when Vanessa first asked me if she could handle all the wedding planning arrangements herself, insisting she wanted to surprise everyone with something special. Looking back now, I should have paid more attention to the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she said it. 3 months before the wedding, I was in my garden tending to my prize rose bushes when Vanessa appeared at my back gate. She was carrying a thick wedding planning binder and wearing one of those flowing sundresses that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Everything about Vanessa seemed perfect. Her honey blonde hair always perfectly styled, her makeup flawless even on casual days, her laugh like silver bells. "Mrs. Catherine," she called out, using the formal address even though I'd told her a dozen times to call me Mom. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and walked over to unlatch the gate. "Of course not, sweetheart. You know you're always welcome." She stepped into my garden, but I noticed she seemed nervous, fidgeting with the corners of her binder. "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding plans. Marcus and I have been discussing it, and we think it would be best if I handled most of the arrangements myself." Something in her tone made me pause. In all the weddings I'd helped plan in my family, my 3 daughters, my 2 older sons, The mothers and grandmothers were always intimately involved. It's tradition. It's how we bond, how we pass down family customs, how we ensure the celebration reflects both families coming together. Oh, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Well, I'm certainly here if you need any help. I have some wonderful vendor recommendations, and there are certain family traditions we always ensure we always ensure we always ensure we always ensure we always have ensure we always have ensure we always have ensure there are certain family traditions we always ensure we always have ensure there are certain family traditions we always have ensure we always have family traditions we always ensure we always have family traditions we always actually, she interrupted, her voice becoming firmer. Marcus and I really want this to be our vision, something completely fresh and new. We don't want to be tied down by traditions that might feel outdated. The way she said outdated sent a chill down my spine. I'd heard that tone before, from people who looked at our family's ways, our customs, our close-knit bonds, and saw something they wanted to change or eliminate entirely. But I smiled and nodded graciously. Of course, dear, whatever makes you and Marcus happy. There is one thing, though, she continued, brightening artificially. We'd love for you to handle the wedding favors, something simple and elegant. I was thinking maybe some lovely tea bags or small candles. Tea bags? At a wedding that would cost more than most people's cars, she wanted me, a woman who once owned 3 successful boutiques and had catered events for city officials, to handle tea bags. That sounds lovely, I lied, maintaining my composure the way my mother taught me. A lady never shows her hurt feelings in public. Over the next 2 months, I watched from the sidelines as Linessa orchestrated what she called the wedding of the century. She hired vendors I'd never heard of, instead of the family friends who'd served our celebrations for decades. She chose a venue across town instead of our family church where Marcus was baptized. She selected a menu that didn't include a single dish from our family's traditional recipes. Most troubling of all, she seemed to go out of her way to minimize my role in everything. When I offered to host the bridal shower, she'd already booked a trendy downtown venue. When I suggested we include Marcus's late father's favorite song in the ceremony music, she said it didn't fit the aesthetic. When I asked about including our family's traditional blessing, she claimed they wanted to keep the ceremony strictly secular. Each rejection felt like a small cut, but I told myself this was normal. Young couples today want to do things their own way. I needed to respect their choices and focus on supporting Marcus's happiness. But it was Marcus's behavior that truly worried me. My youngest son had always been a mama's boy in the best way possible. He called me every Sunday, brought me flowers on Mother's Day without fail, and sought my advice on everything, from job changes to apartment hunting. We'd always been close, sharing inside jokes and long conversations about his dreams for the future. But as the wedding planning progressed, Marcus became distant. He stopped calling as frequently. When he did visit, he seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone and cutting our conversation short. He'd developed this habit of looking over his shoulder, as if he expected someone to be listening. "Son," I said to him one evening when he came by to pick up some family photos Vanessa had requested for a wedding slideshow. "Is everything all right? You seem tense lately." Marcus was rifling through the photo albums I'd laid out on my dining room table, but his movements were hurried, almost frantic. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just wedding stress, you know?" "But you've always handled stress well. Remember when you were studying for the bar exam? You were calm as could be, organized, methodical." "Mom, please." His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I just need to get these photos and go. Vanessa's waiting." I watched him gather the pictures, images of his childhood, family vacations, his graduation from law school, holidays with his siblings. But I noticed he was being very selective about which ones he took. He left behind all the photos that showed our extended family, our church community, the pictures from culture. She said the venue had capacity limitations they hadn't anticipated, and they had to make some difficult cuts to the guest list. She was very polite about it, but Catherine, Dorothy paused, she specifically mentioned that they were prioritizing Vanessa's side of the family and close friends who really understand the couple's vision. I was speechless. Dorothy wasn't just my sister, she was Marcus's godmother. She'd helped raise him after his father died. She'd paid for his law school textbooks when money was tight. The idea that she would be disinvited from his wedding was unthinkable. "There has to be some mistake," I said, already reaching for my phone to call Marcus. "That's what I thought too," Dorothy continued. "So I called Aunt Ruth to see if she'd heard anything. Catherine, she got the same call. So did Uncle Benjamin and Cousin Teresa." My hands started shaking. One by one, Vanessa was systematically removing Marcus's family from his own wedding. When I called Marcus that evening, he sounded exhausted. "Mom, I know what you're going to say, and I feel terrible about it, but the venue really did have restrictions we didn't know about. We had to make some tough choices." "Tough choices," I tried to keep my voice level. "Your Aunt Dorothy raised you. Uncle Benjamin taught you how to drive. These aren't distant relatives, Marcus. These are the people who love you." I know, his voice cracked slightly. "But Vanessa's family is... they're complicated. Her father is paying for most of the wedding, and he had very specific requirements about the guest list. If we don't accommodate his wishes..." He trailed off, but I heard something in that silence that terrified me. Fear. "Marcus, sweetheart, what aren't you telling me?" "Nothing, Mom. Everything's fine. The wedding is going to be beautiful, and I just need everyone to trust that Vanessa and I know what we're doing." But his voice sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the phone call, about Marcus's fear, about the systematic exclusion of our family from what should have been a celebration of unity. I got up around 2 a.m. and made myself a cup of chamomile tea, hoping it would calm my nerves. As I sat in my kitchen, wearing my silk nightgown and thinking about the next day, I made a decision. Whatever was happening, whatever Vanessa was planning, I would be dignified and gracious at the wedding. I would smile, I would celebrate my son's happiness, and I would not cause any drama that might overshadow his special day. I chose my outfit carefully that morning, the navy blue cocktail dress that always made me feel confident, my best jewelry, and my most comfortable but elegant heels. If this was going to be a performance, I would play my part flawlessly. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful, I have to admit. The venue was stunning. A historic mansion with manicured gardens and floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the space with golden afternoon light. Vanessa looked radiant in her gown, and Marcus looked handsome in his charcoal gray tuxedo. But as I watched them exchange vows, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Pause. The guest list was exactly as Dorothy had warned me about, heavily skewed toward Vanessa's side of the family. Her family filled the first 6 rows, while Marcus's side looked sparse and unfamiliar. I recognized maybe a third of the people supposedly there to support my son. Even stranger, Vanessa's father kept glancing at his watch during the ceremony as if he had somewhere else to be. Her mother spent more time photographing the decorations than watching her daughter get married. And there were several well-dressed men I didn't recognize who seemed more interested in taking notes than celebrating. But I smiled through it all. I dabbed at my eyes with my handkerchief during the vows. I blew kisses when Marcus looked my way. I played the role of the proud, supportive mother-in-law perfectly. It wasn't until the reception that everything began to unravel. The seating arrangement was the first red flag. I'd been placed at what was supposedly the head table, but it was positioned strangely, at an angle where I could see most of the reception, but where my back was to the main entrance. It felt deliberate, like I was being positioned to observe rather than participate. Sophia, bless her heart, had been seated at the children's table, but she kept wandering over to check on me. She was the only family member who seemed genuinely happy to see me, throwing her little arms around my waist and complimenting my dress and jewelry. "You look like a queen, Grandma, the most beautiful queen at the whole wedding," she'd whispered during the cocktail hour. It was Sophia who first noticed something wasn't right. We'd just finished the salad course, an elaborate affair with microgreens and edible flowers that probably cost more per plate than some people's weekly grocery budget, when I saw her slip away from the children's table and walk over to where I was sitting. "Grandma," she whispered, climbing onto the chair beside me, "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to get upset right away." My grandmother instincts kicked in immediately. Sophia was a bright child, but she had this habit of getting herself into small troubles, spilling juice, breaking delicate objects, accidentally overhearing conversations she shouldn't. I assumed this was going to be one of those confessions. "What is it, sweetheart?" She glanced around nervously, making sure none of the adults at nearby tables were paying attention to us. The reception was in full swing. The jazz quartet had started playing dinner music. Couples were beginning to drift toward the dance floor, and the champagne was flowing freely. "During the ceremony," Sophia said carefully, "when everyone was watching Daddy and Vanessa say their promises, I saw a man sneak over to the tables where we're sitting now." My attention sharpened. "What kind of man?" "A man in a black suit. He looked like the other men who came with Vanessa's daddy, but sneakier. He had white hair and really shiny shoes." He paused, biting her lower lip the way she did when she was trying to remember important details. "He came over to your chair specifically, Grandma, and he crawled under the table." A chill ran down my spine. "Under the table?" "Uh-huh. I thought maybe he dropped something, but he was down there for a long time, and when he came back up, he wasn't holding anything, but tapping sound like he was sticking something to the bottom of your chair." My heart started pounding so hard I was afraid people would notice. Deep breath. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Sophia?" She nodded solemnly. "And Grandma, after he finished whatever he was doing, he looked around to make sure nobody saw him, and then he walked over to where Vanessa's daddy was sitting and whispered something in his ear, and Vanessa's daddy smiled in a way that didn't look nice." Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Pause. The systematic exclusion of Marcus's family from the wedding. The strange guest list filled with people who looked more like business associates than friends. Marcus's increasing nervousness and fear over the past few months. Vanessa's insistence on controlling every aspect of the wedding planning. And now, someone had deliberately placed something under my chair during the ceremony, when everyone's attention would be focused elsewhere. "Sophia," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady, I need you to do exactly what I tell you, okay? Can you be brave for Grandma? She nodded, her brown eyes wide but trusting. I want you to go back to the children's table and act like nothing happened. Keep playing and laughing with your cousins, but I need you to watch the adults at the grown-up tables and tell me if you see anything else that seems strange. Are you going to look at what the man put under your chair? Long pause. The moment of truth. Whatever was taped to the bottom of my chair had been placed there deliberately, during my son's wedding ceremony, by someone connected to Vanessa's family. Every instinct I had was screaming that this was dangerous, that whatever I was about to find would change everything forever. Yes, baby girl, but first I need to be smart about it. Sophia squeezed my hand. I love you, Grandma. Be careful. As she skipped back to her table, I took a deep breath and assessed my situation. Pause. The reception hall was busy enough that I might be able to investigate without being noticed, but I needed to be strategic. I couldn't just duck under the table in full view of everyone. I stood up gracefully, smoothing down my dress, and walked over to where Marcus and Vanessa were accepting congratulations from a line of well-wishers. My son looked handsome, but tired, and I noticed he kept glancing toward a table where several of Vanessa's male relatives were sitting and watching him intently. Darling, I said, kissing Marcus on the cheek, congratulations again. Everything is The way she emphasized perfect sent another chill through me. This wasn't the grateful acknowledgement of a generous father-in-law. This was a warning. It's absolutely lovely, dear. You've outdone yourself with the planning. Vanessa's smile was sharp as glass. Oh, but the evening isn't over yet. We have a few more surprises planned for later. Before I could ask what she meant, she was already turning to greet the next person in line, dismissing me with practiced politeness. I made my way back to the head table, nodding and smiling at other guests, but my mind was racing. Whatever was under my chair, it was connected to these surprises Vanessa had mentioned. And based on everything I'd observed over the past few months, I had a terrible feeling that these surprises were designed to humiliate me, or worse. I sat back down, acutely aware of the chair beneath me and whatever secret it was hiding. The dinner service continued around me, beautifully presented courses that I could barely taste, speeches from Vanessa's relatives that felt more like business presentations than wedding toasts, music that seemed to grow louder and more overwhelming with each passing minute. As the evening progressed, I noticed more troubling details. The photographers weren't just capturing candid moments, they seemed to be documenting specific interactions, particularly any conversation I had with other guests. One of Vanessa's uncles kept checking his phone and making brief calls, stepping just outside the reception hall where he thought no one would notice. Most disturbing of all, Marcus had stopped making eye contact with me entirely. Whenever I tried to catch his attention, he would find a reason to look away, to turn toward someone else, to suddenly become very interested in his dinner plate. My son was being controlled, and whatever was under my chair was part of the mechanism of that control. Finally, when the main dinner service was ending and people were beginning to get up and mingle more freely, I saw my opportunity. I pretended to drop my napkin. As I bent down gracefully to retrieve it, maintaining the poise and dignity that had been drilled into me since childhood, I let my hand drift toward the underside of my chair. My fingers found it immediately. A large manila envelope, sealed and taped securely to the bottom of the chair. Even through the thick paper, I could feel that it contained something substantial. Multiple pages, maybe photographs, something with weight and significance. But it was what was written on the outside of the envelope that made my blood freeze. On bold black marker, someone had written, "Final notice, payment due tonight." And underneath that, In smaller but equally ominous letters, Catherine Washington, last chance. Oh, my hands trembled as I carefully worked the envelope free from the tape. Whatever this was, it had my name on it, and it was connected to some kind of debt or obligation I knew nothing about. I managed to slip the envelope into my purse without anyone noticing, but my heart was pounding so hard I was afraid I might faint right there at the table. Payment due tonight? Final notice? I didn't owe anyone money. My finances were in perfect order. I owned my house outright, had a comfortable retirement account, and had always been meticulous about paying bills on time. Unless this wasn't about money I owed. Unless this was about something else entirely. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed to powder my nose, and made my way to the ladies' room. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to walk with my usual grace and composure. Whatever was in that envelope, I needed to read it in private before I decided how to respond. The ladies' room was empty except for one of Vanessa's bridesmaids touching up her lipstick. I waited until she left, then locked myself in the large handicap stall at the end of the row. With trembling fingers, I opened my purse and retrieved the envelope. The seal had been broken and resealed. Someone had wanted to make sure I could access whatever was inside. As I tore it open completely, several items fell into my lap. First, a series of photographs. Pictures of me going about my daily routine, grocery shopping, tending my garden, leaving church on Sunday morning, having lunch with my sister Dorothy. Someone had been watching me, following me, documenting my movements for weeks, possibly months. But it was the accompanying documents that made me understand the full scope of what was happening. The first page was a detailed financial report about my assets. My house, my savings account, my retirement funds, even the estimated value of my jewelry collection. Every penny I had in the world, laid out with frightening precision. The second page was a forged promissory note, supposedly signed by me, promising to pay someone called Meridian Capital Holdings the sum of $347,000 by the date of Marcus's wedding. The third page was a letter, typed on official-looking letterhead, informing me that since I had defaulted on this fabricated loan, Meridian Capital Holdings was prepared to seize all my assets to satisfy the debt. And the final page? The final page was the most chilling of all. It was a contract, already signed by Vanessa and someone identified as V. Meridian, president, presumably her father. The contract stated that in exchange for forgiveness of Catherine Washington's debt to Meridian Capital Holdings, Marcus Washington would agree to the following terms: complete cessation of contact with his mother and extended family, transfer of his share of his late father's life insurance policy to Vanessa, agreement to relocate to a city of Vanessa's choosing with no forwarding address provided to family, legal name change for any future children to reflect only Vanessa's family name, signature on a prenuptial agreement that would leave him with nothing if the marriage ended. It was a trap so sophisticated, so carefully planned, that it took my breath away. They were using a completely fabricated debt to force my son into cutting all ties with his family. And the payment due tonight meant they were planning to present him with this ultimatum during his own wedding reception? My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the papers. This wasn't just about money or control. This was about erasing Marcus's identity, his history, his family connections. They wanted to isolate him completely, to make him dependent on Vanessa and her family for everything. And they were using the threat of my financial ruin to make him comply. I sat in that bathroom stall for what felt like hours, but was probably just minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. These people had been planning this for months, Every aspect of the wedding, every excluded family member, every strange interaction, it had all been building up to this moment. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated me. I might be 73 years old, but I hadn't survived this long by being naive or helpless. I raised 5 children as a single mother after my husband died. I built and sold 3 successful businesses. I've navigated decades of challenges and setbacks with grace, intelligence, and determination. And I was not going to let these people destroy my son's life. I carefully placed all the documents back in the envelope and tucked it securely into my purse. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, checked my appearance in the mirror, and prepared to go to war. But first, I needed allies. When I returned to the reception, I scanned the room looking for Sophia. She was still at the children's table, but I could see her watching me with those bright, intelligent eyes. When our gazes met, she gave me a small nod, our secret signal that she was ready to help. I also looked for any sign of Marcus's genuine friends or family members who might still be in attendance. There were a few. His law school roommate David was sitting near the back of the room, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. My nephew Timothy had somehow managed to avoid being disinvited and was nursing a drink at the bar, clearly feeling out of place among Vanessa's crowd. Most importantly, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Near the entrance to the reception hall, there was a table set up with what appeared to be legal documents, and several men in expensive suits who were definitely not wedding guests. They kept checking their watches and occasionally glancing toward the head table where Marcus and Vanessa were sitting. The pieces all fit together. They were planning to present Marcus with their ultimatum publicly during the reception, when he would be surrounded by Vanessa's family and supporters. They wanted witnesses to his capitulation, evidence that he had agreed to their terms willingly. They were going to blackmail my son in front of a room full of people, using the threat of my financial destruction as leverage? But I had the evidence of their fraud right in my purse. I made my way back to the head table, my mind racing through possibilities. I could confront them directly, but that would cause a scene and might put Marcus in even more danger. I could call the police, but fraud cases are complex, and these people clearly had resources. I accepted the champagne graciously. How thoughtful of you, dear. Yes, I imagine this evening will be quite memorable. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, that I wasn't showing the fear or confusion she'd expected. She'd been planning this moment for months, anticipating my shock and panic when I discovered the envelope. My calm composure was not part of her script. "I hope you're prepared for what comes next," she said, her voice losing some of its artificial sweetness. "Oh, I'm always prepared, darling. That's how I've survived this long." Now she looked genuinely unsettled. She glanced toward the table where her father and his associates were sitting, and I saw her give a small, uncertain shake of her head. The evening was about to take a very different turn than they had planned. At exactly 9 o'clock, I could tell because Vanessa's father kept checking his expensive watch. The music stopped and someone tapped a microphone near the small stage where the jazz quartet had been playing. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced a man I didn't recognize, "if we could have everyone's attention, please. We have a special presentation for the bride and groom." This was it, the moment they'd been orchestrating for months. I watched as Marcus was guided toward the stage, looking confused and increasingly nervous. Vanessa took his arm possessively, but I could see the tension in her body language. Several of the well-dressed men who'd been sitting with Vanessa's father began moving through the crowd, positioning themselves strategically around the room. It was like watching a military operation unfold. "Before we continue with the evening's festivities," the announcer continued, "we need to address a small matter of business that affects our wonderful couple." Marcus looked genuinely confused. What kind of business? Vanessa's father stood up, smoothing his expensive suit jacket. Son, there's something we need to discuss. It seems there's been a financial complication that requires immediate attention. The room fell silent. Even the catering staff stopped what they were doing to watch. This was the moment. They were about to present Marcus with the fabricated debt and force him to choose between his family and his new wife. But I was ready for them. I stood up gracefully, my navy blue dress catching the light from the chandeliers, my pearls gleaming with quiet elegance. Every eye in the room turned to me as I walked toward the stage with the confidence of a woman who had faced down much worse than a room full of con artists. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent reception hall. "I believe there's been some confusion that needs to be clarified." Vanessa's father looked annoyed. "Ma'am, this is a private family matter." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong," I interrupted, reaching into my purse and withdrawing the envelope. "This appears to be very much my business, considering it has my name on it." The look of shock on Vanessa's face was priceless. She had gone from glowing bride to pale-faced co-conspirator in the space of seconds. My calm composure was not part of her script. "I received some very interesting documents this evening. Documents that suggest I owe a substantial debt to something called Meridian Capital Holdings." Marcus looked genuinely bewildered. "Mom, what debt are you talking about? What debt?" I smiled at my son with all the love and protection I'd felt for him since the day he was born. "Oh, my sweet son, that's the right question, sweetheart. What debt indeed?" I turned to address the room, every inch the dignified matriarch I'd been raised to be. "You see, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in business for over 40 years. I understand contracts, I understand legal documents, and I understand fraud when I see it." The silence in the room was deafening. I could see some of Vanessa's relatives shifting uncomfortably, realizing their carefully laid plan was falling apart. "The documents I found tonight," I held up the envelope, "include a forged promissory note with my supposed signature, fraudulent financial assessments of my assets, and most interesting of all, a contract that would require my son to abandon his family in exchange for forgiveness of this fabricated debt." Marcus's face went white. "What contract, Mom? I don't understand." "The contract your new wife and her father have been planning to present to you tonight, son. The contract that would have forced you to choose between saving your mother from financial ruin or maintaining any relationship with your family." The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Several guests began pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Vanessa's father stepped forward aggressively. "You can't prove any of this, old woman. Those documents are perfectly legal, and your son agreed to every term willingly. He signed contracts." "What contracts?" Marcus interrupted sharply. "I never signed anything about abandoning my family or giving up Dad's life insurance." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's father had just admitted that there were contracts Marcus hadn't seen, agreements made without his knowledge or consent. "Vincent," Vanessa hissed at her father, "shut up." But it was too late. The damage was done. "Vincent Meridian," I said, the pieces falling into place. "Meridian Capital Holdings. You named your fake company after yourself. How unimaginatively criminal of you." Several guests were now openly recording with their phones. The catering staff had stopped pretending to work and were watching the drama unfold with fascination and horror. Marcus turned to face his bride, and I could see the heartbreak and betrayal written across his face. "Vanessa, how long have you been planning this?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "Everything I did was for us. Your family would have held you back forever. They're small-minded, traditional, stuck in the past. I was trying to free you from all of that. By destroying my mother? By forcing me to abandon everyone I love? By helping you see that I'm the only one who truly understands your potential. Your family sees you as their little boy forever. I see you as the man you could become." The manipulation in her words was breathtaking. Even now, caught red-handed in an elaborate fraud scheme, she was trying to convince Marcus that her betrayal was actually love. But my son was finally seeing clearly. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out," Marcus roared, his voice echoing off the ceiling of the reception hall. "You and your criminal father and all of your accomplices get out of here before I have you all arrested. Marcus, you're making a terrible mistake. Without me, without my father's connections, you'll never amount to anything. You'll be stuck in that mediocre law practice forever, tied to your mother's apron strings." "I'd rather be tied to my mother's apron strings than chained to your lies," Marcus said firmly. He pulled off his wedding ring and held it out to her. "This marriage is over before it started."
The scene that followed was chaos. Vanessa burst into tears. Whether from genuine emotion or calculated performance, I couldn't tell. Her father began shouting threats about lawsuits and consequences. Several of their well-dressed associates started moving toward the exits, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. But Marcus stood firm beside me, no longer the scared, controlled young man he'd been for months. He was my son again, strong, principled, and unafraid. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the remaining guests, "I apologize for this disruption to what should have been a celebration. Those of you who are genuine friends and family, please stay if you'd like. The food is paid for, the bar is open, and I think we could all use a drink after what we've witnessed tonight." Several people actually laughed at that, breaking some of the tension that had filled the room. As Vanessa and her entourage made their dramatic exit, she stopped at the door to shout something about Marcus ruining his life and being sorry someday. Sophia came running over from the children's table. "Grandma," she cried, throwing her arms around my waist. "You were so brave! You were like a superhero!" I hugged her tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair and feeling overwhelmed with gratitude that we had caught this plot before it succeeded. "We were brave together, sweetheart. You were the one who noticed something was wrong and had the courage to tell me about it." Marcus knelt down to Sophia's level. "Thank you, little cousin. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Over the next hour, as the remaining guests processed what had happened and gradually began to leave, Marcus and I sat together at that head table where the nightmare had begun. The envelope with all its fraudulent documents lay open between us, evidence of how close we'd come to losing each other forever. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to know how sorry I am. For the past few months, for doubting you, for almost letting them convince me that cutting ties with our family was the right thing to do." I took his hand in both of mine. "Son, you were being manipulated by professionals. They preyed on your love for me, twisted it into fear, and used it as a weapon against both of us. You have nothing to apologize for." "But I should have trusted you. I should have come to you when they first approached me with their threats." And I should have pushed harder when I sensed something was wrong. We both learned something tonight about the importance of communication and trust. Marcus nodded, and I could see some of the guilt and fear finally leaving his shoulders. What happens now? Do we press charges? Oh, absolutely, I said firmly. What they attempted tonight was fraud, extortion, and probably several other felonies I can't even name. But first, we call your Aunt Dorothy and Uncle Benjamin and everyone else who was disinvited from this wedding. We tell them the truth, and we plan a proper celebration. A proper celebration? Well, I said with a smile, you're still single, aren't you? And we have a lot of family who missed out on celebrating your happiness tonight. I think we could all use a party. Marcus laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in months. You know what, Mom? That sounds perfect. As we were preparing to leave, David, Marcus's law school friend, approached our table hesitantly. Marcus, I have to tell you something, he said nervously. Vanessa approached me about 6 weeks ago. She wanted me to give her information about your finances, your family relationships, personal details. She said she was planning a surprise for you and needed to know more about your background. Marcus and I exchanged glances. What did you tell her? Nothing, David said quickly. It felt wrong, invasive. But now I understand why she was asking. She was gathering intelligence for this whole scheme. Another piece of the puzzle. They had been thorough, systematic, approaching everyone in Marcus's life to gather information they could use against him. David, would you be willing to document this conversation for the authorities? Your testimony could be important evidence. Absolutely. Marcus, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad you saw through it before it was too late. As we finally left the venue that night, Marcus insisted on walking me to my car. The October air was crisp, and the parking lot was nearly empty except for a few catering vehicles and the last stragglers from what had supposed to have been a wedding reception. Mom, Marcus said as I was getting into my car, there's something else I need to tell you. My heart clenched. After everything we'd been through tonight, what more could there be? The life insurance money from Dad, he continued. Vanessa had already convinced me to put it in a joint account with her. She said it showed trust and commitment. The money, it's gone. I felt a wave of sadness, not for the money itself, but for what it represented. That life insurance policy was James's final gift to our children, his way of making sure they were secure even after he was gone. How much? I asked gently. All of it. $80,000. She moved it out of the joint account 3 weeks ago, said she was investing it for our future. I reached out and touched my son's face tenderly. Pause. Marcus, listen to me. That money is gone, but you are safe. Your integrity is intact, your family loves you, and you have your whole life ahead of you. Money can be earned again. Trust and family connections, once broken, are much harder to repair. But Dad worked so hard to leave us that security. And the most important security your father left you is right here. I tapped his chest over his heart. He taught you to be honest, to value family, to stand up for what's right. Tonight, when it mattered most, you chose those values over fear and manipulation. That's worth far more than $80,000. 3 weeks later, I was in my garden again, tending to my roses as the November chill settled over the city. Pause. The legal proceedings against Vanessa, her father, and their associates were moving forward. The FBI had discovered that this wasn't their first attempt at this type of fraud. They had targeted at least 3 other young professionals with similar schemes over the past 5 years. Marcus had thrown himself into helping the authorities build his case, providing testimony and evidence. The process was painful but therapeutic, giving him a way to channel his anger and betrayal into something productive. But the best part was watching him reconnect with our family. He'd called Dorothy personally to apologize and explain what had happened. He'd driven to Chicago for a weekend to spend time with her and Uncle Benjamin. He'd reached out to all the cousins and relatives who had been systematically excluded from his life over the past few months. And every Sunday, he came to my house for dinner, just like he used to. "Mom," he said one evening as we were cleaning up after a meal I'd cooked especially for him, all his childhood favorites, the dishes Vanessa had deemed outdated and unsophisticated, "I've been thinking about dating again." I paused in my dishwashing. "Oh?" "But this time, I want you to meet her early. I want your opinion, your insight. I never want to be isolated from my family again. Marcus, you don't need my permission to date, or to fall in love, or even to get married again someday. You just need to trust your own judgment, and trust that the people who truly love you will always want what's best for you, even when it's complicated." He hugged me from behind as I stood at the sink, resting his chin on top of my head the way he used to when he was a teenager and suddenly found himself taller than his mother. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for saving me." "We saved each other, son. That's what families do." Pause. As I finish telling you this story, I'm sitting in that same garden, now blooming with spring flowers. It's been 6 months since that terrible night, and I can honestly say that our family has never been closer. Marcus is dating someone new, a lovely young teacher named Sarah who comes to family dinners and asks genuine questions about our traditions and our history. She's nothing like Vanessa, and everything like the kind of person I always hoped my son would find. Vanessa and her father were convicted on multiple fraud charges. She received 3 years in prison, he received 7. The other associates involved in the scheme received various sentences. Marcus never got his money back, but he did get something far more valuable: the knowledge that he could trust his own instincts and the love of his family.
The documents from that night are in a safety deposit box now, evidence preserved for the legal proceedings, and a reminder of how close we came to losing everything. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Sophia hadn't been paying attention, if she hadn't had the courage to tell me what she'd witnessed. But then I remember something my mother used to say. The truth has a way of coming to light, especially when good people are brave enough to shine a lamp on the darkness. Sophia was our lamp that night, and Marcus's courage in choosing truth over fear was the light that exposed everything. If you're listening to this story and you recognize any of the warning signs I've described, if someone in your life is trying to isolate you from your family, control your finances, or force you to make choices based on fear rather than love, please know that you don't have to face it alone. Trust your instincts. Reach out to the people who have always loved you, and remember that anyone who truly cares about you will never ask you to choose between them and your family. The people who love you want you to be connected, supported, and surrounded by a network of care. The people who want to use you will always try to make you feel like you have to choose. Choose love, choose family, choose truth. And pay attention to the children in your life. They often see what we adults miss. Marcus and Sarah are getting engaged next month. This time, I'm helping plan the wedding, and our entire extended family will be there to celebrate. We're having it at our family church with all our traditional foods and music that includes both his father's favorite songs and new melodies that represent their future together. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be filled with love and joy and the kind of genuine happiness that can't be manufactured or manipulated. And you can be sure I'll be watching to make sure nothing suspicious gets taped to the bottom of any chairs. Some lessons once learned are never forgotten. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it serves as a reminder that it's never too late to stand up for the truth, and that sometimes the most important battles we fight are for the people we love most. Take care of your families, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that love requires you to abandon the people who have always been there for you. Because real love multiplies. It doesn't subtract.